Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the multi-lock. This is their part number, MOR1 is what it is, and we'll go over the rest of what those part numbers mean as well. This is basically a mortise, not basically, it's a mortise cylinder is what it is. So this MOR1 means that it is a mortise cylinder. A mortise cylinder is a type of cylinder that gets threaded into a piece of hardware. It might be threaded directly into something like a mortise cassette. It might be held into something with a retaining ring, such as a cash box. Or maybe a more typical application might be a key switch, or certainly an exit device trim. You could hold on a mortise cylinder in that sort of scenario. And mortise cylinders are used very commonly in lots of applications. The MOR1 from Multi-Lock specifically means that it is an 1.1 long cylinder. Cylinders are measured from the underside of the head to the back of the cam, is what this is. 1 in 5/32 diameter, 32 threads per inch. And this cylinder, there are 4 of them on the job for this client. They're going to be used in a rather unusual application, and we will talk about that now. Let's do so. Let's talk about where you use this and the unusual application this job is going to be used in. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. We're also going to dissect that part number as well. So mortise cylinders are used most commonly in mortise locks. You're going to have typically a commercial style mortise lock that's going to fit into what we would call a government 86 or an 86 edge in the door. That faceplate of the mortise lock is 8 inch tall, generally 1.25 inch wide, and available in dozens of different functions and from scores of manufacturers, countless manufacturers. The length of a mortise cylinder is going to be dependent on a number of things. First of all, the length is something that you will generally need to specify, or at least understand. How does the length of the mortise cylinder that I am using work in conjunction with all the other hardware, work in conjunction with the thickness of the door, and maybe even where the lock is placed within the thickness of the door? When you're dealing with applications such as this, where we're going to supply a mortise lock by someone else, you need to then go out and get your cylinder. So the mortise lock that we're using, the unusual application part, is a mortise lock. These mortise locks are comprised of parts from 3 different manufacturers. We've got high security cylinders from Multi-Lock. I wrote the hardware set for this job. The job has 4 tall walnut fire doors on it, and the client gave us broad specifications. They want obviously hinges because they're fire doors, a self-closing device. We need a lock set, we need a door stop, things of that nature. So, but the client started out with wanting to do, and now they're fire doors, the client started out with wanting to do a concealed hinge. And the problem with the concealed hinge is the hinge that was selected isn't permissible for use in a 90-minute rated opening. That was a problem, so we can't use that. We can do 20-minute, but the doors are 90-minute. And the client ultimately had to go to a typical steel-based butt hinge, a full mortise hinge. But the client also started out with locks wanting to use a European-style lock that would take a profile cylinder. And if you're familiar with those locks, you'll know generally that the trim is above the cylinder. So taking that as a cue, I went to Accurate, knowing that they'll take mortise locks and build them such that they can be used upside down. And I've done it in the past. I've done upside down locks previously where we had a Dutch door. In fact, the client wanted a mortise lock, and my logic was, well, let's get the cylinder down a little bit lower so you can use that easier and put that knob trim up a little bit taller, a little bit higher. Just seemed to be something that made more sense to invert the placement of the cylinder and the operating trim. The knob you don't have to look at in order to turn. The key, you kind of need to see where you're going and pulling that a little bit further down. underneath the shelf of the Dutch door of the lower leaf is what the plan was there. So taking the cue of the profile locks, I specified upside down mortise locks from Accurate. The client needs a specific lever and rose look. Client wanted a tubular straight bar style lever in black with a square rose. Well, I was able to pull that trim out of Yale. So now we've got Yale inside and outside trim packages. Accurate will make the locks, specifically the hubs, for the Yale cylinder that I threw on the high security cylinders. If you're going to go to all this effort, why not put a high security cylinder where when you know that you get this key back from whoever you've given it to, they've not copied it. They've not been able to copy it, even if they tried. So that's where we're using these cylinders. That's the job for this. But where you're going to use a multi-lock cylinder is when you want to have total key control. The patent on this cylinder is, it's either 2030, pardon me, the patent on this key design, the MTL 800, is either good until 2035 or 2039. I forget. I should know, but it's so many years in the future that it's, you know, I'll never turn 50, you know, when you think that when you're 18 years old. So the patent is so far down the road, I don't even think of it. And what makes this keyway special, and please bear with me, my knowledge, my accumulation or acquiring of knowledge in multi-lock is a evolution, and I'm in the beginning part of those stages. I'm just crawling out of the ocean, so to speak. So I like to think of this technology as 4 major components when it comes to the key itself. You've got the milling in the key blank, and with this snake groove that's here as well. You've got the two primary milling components. You can see that snake up on the top, we'll call it a snake. And then you'll see this milling, this straight milling right here. Okay. So that snake cut, that's going to be number 1. Well, let's take a look here now. Yeah, okay. So let's say that the milling is going to be exactly what we're going to be considering something that's unusual. The milling, that we'll call that number 1. Okay, so the milling on the key is going to be 1. Number 2 is going to be the profile of that snake cut that's there. The actual shape of that squiggly line. That's going to be 2. That's going to move finger pins inside of there. And unless those are aligned properly, there's a little post and they ride in that snake as the key goes in and out, and it takes those little, because where the post is, it takes them and, well, it takes them and moves them around. And unless they're aligned properly, the gates of those finger pins, they're not really called finger pins, I'm still in the evolution stage, they won't be aligned to allow, you know, being able to get around the ward or the blockage. So I would say that that's number 2. Number 3 is going to be these dimple cuts. Now, multi-lock is not the only family of high security cylinders that does dimple cuts. Capgemini or Sergeant Kiso would be names that do dimple cuts. What makes multi-lock special is the fact that in those dimple cuts, I don't know how close I can get to the camera. It's still, oh, I've got close. You can see that there's a little teat. These 2 right here. Those 2 large ones right there. You can see there's a little teat there. Well, if you look at the one next to it here, it's not a teat. It's actually a deeper hole that's there. So the principle of the multi-lock is you have a pin that sits in that dimple cut. Well, they're actually telescoping pins. There's a pin inside of that larger pin. So the outside pin has to sit in the outer dimple cut area, but then the inside pin has to either be lifted 1, the same, or below 1. You've got to have both of those pins satisfied. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4 is going to be this guy right here. That's called an alpha spring. That's what is known as an active element, and it moves up and down. Okay. Now, the alpha spring, or the active element, is not unusual in the sense of it's not unique to multi-lock, but it's utterly brilliant. What happens, and I've read the patents, I've read textbooks, the active element basically is something that needs to be able to shift as the key enters the broaching of the cylinder plug to get around a blockage, up and over it, and then get behind it, so that at that point, a check pin that's back there can then be modified. So without an active element being able to float or move inside the key blank, and by the way, the new Medico 4 has an active element, and this is, an active element is decades old. Medico didn't didn't invent it. They evolved it. But what the active element does is not only is ingenious in the fact that you've got a captured piece of something in the key that can float, but what it really does is thwart 3D printing. So you could, in theory and in practice, you should be able to scan this and print a 3D print a key, not with an active element, at least not at this time. Okay, so extremely robust and secure. Now keep in mind, this is the product of hundreds of years, in fact thousands of years, of lock evolution. It's not going to stop my sledgehammer from breaking the door in. But what this does utterly thwart is if I give you the key and I get it back, I know that you've not been able to copy it. You can't copy it. It's not happening. And what I mean by that, there are 4 cylinders, if you recall me saying, on this job, and I happen to open this one. Without your key card and the magnetic stripe on the back of it, you won't be able to get this cut. So you could walk into a multi-lock distributor and ask them to cut a key. If you don't have the credential, you can't get it cut. Not only it's identifying who you are, but believe it or not, the machine that cuts the keys will not go through the routine of cutting a key without you swiping this, because on that magnetic strip is the information about how this is cut. Okay, so it utterly locks down your system. This client really didn't require a lockdown system like that. It wasn't part of the specification originally. I worked it into the specification because I felt that it suited the best needs of the owner. The owner agreed with that. There was an application, a job that I shipped yesterday, multi-lock, same order, where this fella in Canada had a problem of people going into his door. He's got 2 Schlage lever locks, and he knows that someone's entering the room and doing something, I don't know. And it's not an unusual call for me to get. I need to keep people from going out of there. When I give someone the key, I know that they're copying it. And I hear that often. I says, well, we can stop that permanently. You give that key to that person and you get it back, they've not copied it. The problem is giving the key and not getting it back. That's where the problem really comes into play. But you can rest assured that they've not copied the key. So let's dissect the part number a little bit. The 609B2, that's the keyway. That's actually Architectural Builder Supply keyway, the 609B2. So when I order something for you, it's going to say 609B2 because that identifies me as the absupply.net as the distributor. The MOR1 means it's a mortise cylinder, and the 1 is a reference to the 1 1/8 length. The CO3 is the cam on the back. These are going into those Accurate upside-down mortise locks, which will end up going in like this. Accurate uses, their locks require a Clover-style cam or a Corbin-Russwin type cam. So that's the 03. The 22 is black. What I have discovered that Multi-Lock does is they use the last 2 digits of the BHMA code. So 622 is black. They use just the 22. If you wanted satin chrome, it would be 26, which is a little confusing because just 26 you think of as polished chrome. but actually if it's BHMA, 25 is polished chrome. So they'll use the last two digits, 03, 26, 25, 22, 13 for oil rub bronze for 613. So that's where that is. The A4 is just the factory code that all four of these are keyed alike. We've got 4 locks, we're going to key them all alike. Also in my part number, and it's in the title of this video, is the collar. I believe that's a .22 thick collar. We're going to need cylinder collars on this job because the 1 1/8 is technically too long for the 1 3/4 thick doors. So that's what we're going to use on that. It's going to look just like that. Now you'll notice the multi-lock logo that's here. Okay, you see a guy flexing his pose like that, that's multi-lock. Now it also is stamped UL. Now that's really interesting, and it's something that I've not mentioned yet. If you have a UL stamp on a cylinder, that means it's UL compliant. It doesn't mean it's fire rated when it applies to a cylinder. It means that it's UL 437 compliant, and I hope I'm not going to eat my words, but every time I see UL on a cylinder, it's UL 437 compliant. UL 437 is a standard within the industry that defines the highest level of resistance to a multitude of threats physically on the cylinder. The amount of time that you're permitted to try to pick it open, the amount of time that you're permitted to try to break it open, the subjecting of the cylinder mechanically, physically to assault environment. There are several criteria that if you test your cylinder for UL 437 compliance, that it will be subjected to, outlined in the UL 437 compliant, UL 437 standard. So if you're looking for lockdown key construction, key control, and you're looking for the most robust attack-proof cylinder, you're looking for something that's certainly UL 437 on top of the platform of the high-security keying system. Let's switch to the screen view and we'll take a closer look at the supporting information. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Okay, let's take a look at the manufacturer's catalog. Before we do that, let's take a look at some photos that we have of everything. There's the box that this cylinder ships in. The contents of the box. The face of the cylinder. What's interesting is they've got LOCK here, but they spell it LOK in other places, showing the broaching of the cylinder. Not much to see there, but just nonetheless. Cross side view, so to speak, 1 1/8 from the underside of the head to the back of the cam. There are different lengths, I'll show you that. 32 threads per inch, 1 5/32 diameter. That's a standard for builder's hardware. There are 4 different types, pardon me, there are 4 different sizes of Mortise cylinders. 3/4 inch peanut style, that's one. Then the builder's hardware size. There's 1 1/2, which is called a jumbo or a master ring. And then there's 2-inch mogul. Moguls are used in detention work. Solid brass construction. This is the number 3 cam. The trim ring, your 2 keys. You'll notice this little area here, that's where you can push in one of these colored pins. I think it's just really intended for color identification, is what it is. So if you were to have a if you were to have a master keyed environment, you might use a different color push in insert to indicate a change key versus a master key, and it gets popped in right here. Okay, now the catalog, and there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the multi-lock products we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the product catalog. Let's take a look at that, and we're going to immediately search for MOR1 as soon as that loads. Alright, we are loaded. MOR1. It should come up a number of times, actually. Yeah, this is what we're looking for here. Here's the table of the different Mortise cylinders. MOR0 is a 1-inch. Sorry, wrong page. Here we go. MOR1 is... Sorry, I'm new here. MOR0 is a 1-inch. 1 is 1 1/8. 2 is 1 1/4. 3 is 1 3/8. I don't understand their structure of numbers, but 1 1 1/8, 1 1/4, 1 3/8, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, 2-inch. If you're doing something longer than 2-inch, it's really unusual. And I don't know off the top of my head if I have an answer for needing something longer than 2-inch. I might. I just don't at this very moment. What I mean by that is major manufacturing makes extensions for Mortise cylinders that you can mechanically fasten to the back. I don't know if there's a driver that's compatible with this. I'll discover that at some point. You can do 1 1/8 concealed. That is an application where you will have an escutcheon fit over the face of the cylinder, so you can't even see the face of the cylinder. They do refer to a mogul that's here. That's 1 1/8. So that is the table of cylinders. Here is the how to order section. As I'd mentioned earlier, 609B2, that's our keyway. Then you call out the cylinder, then you call out the finish, then you call out how you want it keyed, but you call out the cylinder along with the cam that you need. So this is really an MOR1 CO3 is really what it is, because it has a 3 cam. I happen to add the part number for the trim ring. In the description, because it needs to be specified, is the bottom line. That cylinder is not going to automatically include a trim ring, even though, let's back up. That cylinder is probably going to include a trim ring, but they make different trim rings. So what we have to be able to do is to specify which trim ring we want, and I'll see if I can find the table of where those trim rings are at. And I did. It is on page 123 of the catalog. So my application required the MOR01 ring because it's 0.22 dimension. Now 0.22, that's just less than a 1/4 inch. That's going to be a reference to the overall height of the collar, the overall. But this, so it's 0.22 from here down to the backside. This dimension here, let me tell you what that is, because that's actually more important. In fact, I think you'll need a wave washer to go along with this. And right now I'm using my caliper to measure that. And I'm coming up with 0.108, so just less than 1/8 of an inch with my caliper. So I would be probably sticking a wave washer underneath here. A wave washer is come up with an image for one for you. Yeah, this is a good picture of a wave washer. Maybe a little bit easier to understand when you look at this image of a pack of 10. So the different Mortise cylinders. Now, Mortise cylinder collars or trim rings. Now, suffice it to say, this catalog is absolutely full of all things cylinder related to multi-lock. Also wanted to show you the different cams that they have available. And I've never encountered a need for a cam that they couldn't provide, but I also am a relatively new distributor. So, whoop, sorry. You've got the 01 cam, Adam's right. That's probably just a standard cam, or a Yale cam they may call it. That looks like that is our Clover cam. I don't know what the 04 is. That could be Falcon. Yeah, it is Falcon actually, right here, Falcon. I saw that was Lockwood. I may have guessed that to be Sargent. That's Schlage. That might be Yale. That number 8 cam. Sargent offset. So Yale also has an offset cam. 10, no idea. Oh yeah, sure. Corbin Jumbo, and that is the 1.5" diameter master ring. That makes sense. That is what those look like. That's Baldwin. 12, couldn't tell you. It's a Yale type, so you're obviously some Yale lock's going to take this funny cam. 13 and 15, let's take a look. Marks and Vingcard. 16, 17, 18, 44 Yale alarm lock. And another Falcon is what it was, yeah. So nonetheless, you've got information. You've got different cams here. That's 17. I've bumped into that in the past. And you know where I've bumped into that? Yale 2160. I've seen that on the back of Mortise cylinders when used with a Mortise deadbolt. The 3 3/4 tall or the 4 1/4 tall Mortise deadbolt. I've seen that cam on the back of those when all you're doing is throwing a deadbolt. It's a really handy document. There is a lot to dive into when it comes to the platform itself. These are the telescoping pins that are referred to here. You've got the inner and the outer pins. Well, actually, that's the MTL 600. We're looking at MTL 800. Forgive me. Yeah, here we are. The different telescoping pins inside the platform. These are those finger pins that I had talked about earlier, internal pins, internal plug pins they call them. And those need to be absolutely arranged so that the gate that's cut in there allows the sidebar to fall into place. So there's notches in these pins that, unless they're aligned properly, and that's the little post that rides in that snake cut. So you've got stacked dimple cut pins, telescoping dimple cut pins. You've got that active element. You've got the profile itself, that snake cut, that's going to force those pins in the right position so the sidebar can seat into it. And then you've got that milling that's on there as well. Also in this catalog is a list of, well, I was going to tell you about the key blanks, but that's what those finger pins look like. You can see that those cuts are in different locations. These shallow slices, that's just for anti-picking. I can't imagine anyone being able to pick this open, but as Peter Field from Medico said, with enough time, you'd be able to bypass any cylinder. This is that eccentric pin. That is what is governed by the alpha spring, the active element that's there. Great technology, and I would encourage you to dive into this. If you are in the locksmith world at all, this is going to be a irreplaceable resource. Those key blanks are up near the front of the catalog. There's padlocks. There's different types of locks that are included in here as well. They have a lever. There is the key cutting machine, the KC5. That is basically a very expensive. That's the most expensive key machine I've ever bought, and that's what is. You'll need your key card to make that work to cut your key. Showing you that platform, real nice picture there. Then there's a reference to key blanks that I was trying to get to, and here they are. Just part numbers for different key blanks in this catalog. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you. thanks to our clients, Architectural Builder Supply is building an additional facility. And what follows is not only a look at the acreage that we're building the facility on, but also first the architectural renderings as they exist, or at least the architectural plans as they exist at this time. Thank you very much. Let's take a look. All right, let's take a look at the architecturals as they exist at this moment, or at least it wouldn't be proper to call these architecturals, but it would be proper to call them renderings in the sense of they're conceptual drawings, they're not renderings. So the entire space is going to look like this in terms of a site rendering. This will be a 22,000 square foot building, of which will have specific purpose areas. There'll be a workshop down here. This is a few thousand square feet that will be likely woodworking, metalworking, CNC, things of that nature. This will be an office area here, a private office area. This will be Architectural Builders Supply expanded storage area where we will be able to do fulfillment. The entire space in the center is going to be all of the volume, as I call it. Large components will be able to be stored in stock there. Machinery that's too large to fit otherwise may be put out here. Specific facility rooms, and then some recreation over here. Let's take a look at that drone footage, and thank you very much for taking a look.